Just to kind of add on to that, in kind of my background, I grew up, I'm going to say quasi-Methodist, quasi-Baptist. It was kind of weird. I eventually joined an evangelical college ministry, as a lot of people know with my story, and I did feel a kind of zeal after I was sort of deconverting. And also, there was a process, too. Like, I kind of went from more conservative Christian to more liberal Christian before I completely stepped out, which, as you obviously know, that can be two different religions within itself, depending on who you're talking to. And there's definitely something to be said about the sort of, angry atheist phase that people kind of bring about, people wanting to talk to others about their atheism in some way. And it's kind of a different world when you're coming from an evangelical perspective to an atheist perspective than probably from like a Mormon perspective to an atheist perspective, especially since you have a lot more cultural ties when you're a Mormon. There's so many more things you can relate to with other people. We were even joking about this on Twitter. There's a lot of deep cuts to Mormonism that can be inaccessible to some people. And I understand why there's kind of this whole little group that kind of keeps to themselves and doesn't fully coalesce with everybody else. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's like going. I would imperfectly compare it to being the veteran of a war, right? You've gone through some completely alien, very bizarre, singular experience, and then you come back. And the only other people that really understand you are that select few that went through a similar experience as you. So it's because Mormonism is a lot of people would argue it's not Christian. I don't know what the difference is. What they say they believe in Christ. What's the problem? Like, of course they're Christians. That's the blood test, as far as I'm concerned, for knowing if a person is a Christian or not. Right? They say it. Mm-hmm. But they have all these other layers on top of it. The Book of Mormon is this really strange attempt that Joseph Smith made to add a third testament to the Bible about Jesus in Central America, preaching to the Incans and the Aztecs, who were actually Jews. It's a crazy story. So not everybody knows that and gets it, So it makes Mormons, they call themselves a peculiar people. And it definitely makes them a peculiar people, and it makes ex-Mormons kind of, not everybody really understands you, you know, especially when you're new to it. And it's like you were saying about being an angry atheist or an angry ex-person. I think it's very common in Mormonism to, when you're leaving, I'm sure it's common in other religions, but certainly in Mormonism, when you're leaving, to really experience a tremendous amount of anger.
Yes.
That maybe the people who were responsible for your well-being as a child, your upbringing, didn't do their due diligence, right?
Yes.
So I think all of us, and this is what our podcast hopes to kind of talk about too, is we're all on a journey. Mm-hmm. And, I watched that video with you when you were being kind of, approached in street epistemology. And yes, that was a different you, but you weren't an idiot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were making sense out of the world in the way that you were taught, or that you knew how, and you thought you had certain answers. And later it turned out that maybe that wasn't exactly the case. But you weren't stupid.
Yeah.
And then you went on a journey, like you said, you became a more liberal Christian, and then eventually you left. Right. And so I think it's, have you seen the Book of Mormon musical?
I've listened to the soundtrack. I've never actually seen the show myself.
I mean, it's quite brilliant, especially from, Matt and Trey, who are not Mormons. They really hit the Mormon amygdala in really interesting ways. Like, they found the essence of what it meant to be Mormon, and kind of brilliantly. But they said a great thing that I think informs the work we do on our show, which is, when they were writing the musical, they said, we wanted to be absolutely brutal to the church and completely tender to the guys. So it was, yes, they were going to mock Mormonism and talk about its absurdities, and its, in the song where he talks about he's going to get his own planet, those are all things they believe. But they were pretty sweet to these earnest young men who think they're doing some critical work, right?
Yes. And
I think that's important for us as a community to understand and to think about.
yeah, and I'll be willing to say this about myself. I was indoctrinated into my religion.
Sure.
There was a lot of factors that were in my control, but a lot of them that weren't exactly in my control and out of my control. And I really like analyzing like the socioeconomic ties we can look into as to why people believe in certain beliefs that they do, and how that can affect the cognitive capabilities of some people, especially if they're living in areas where they're not able to have food on the table every single day. And so having a belief kind of helps them as a social structure in some way, and how that can inform their beliefs. I mean, there's so many lenses that you can look at it. And if you are looking at it from the binary of, well, religious people are stupid, and if you believe this, then you're dumb, and if you don't, then you're smart, then it's not nuanced enough to really have a really great conversation about this. There's a lot of factors. As much as we sometimes try to simplify it, there's just so many factors to consider. And like I said, what you guys are doing with the show is great. I think it's reaching a lot of other ex-Mormons. Obviously, you guys have quite a bit of a fan base